This program is brought to you by Parkway Cancer Center. The World Cancer Report revealed back in 2003 that cancer rates were set to increase at an alarming rate globally. The deadly disease, claiming millions of lives worldwide annually, carries with it a daunting aura. Often, the focus tends to be on cancer prevention. For many of us, getting cancer might seem like a death sentence. But over the years, though, the battle against cancer has been waged with new weapons. A broad range of drugs and technologies have entered the scene, applied in conjunction with bold strategies by medical professionals dedicated to circumvent cancer's once gloomy inevitability. The battle against cancer is now fought with renewed hope. Dr. Ang is the Medical Director and Senior Consultant Medical Oncologist of Parkway Cancer Center. He has been an oncologist for 25 years now and has achieved an impressive track record. For many who first encounter him, there seems to be an infectious air of optimism about him.
From a discipline which was once looked upon as something which was depressing, now people enthusiastically enter this subspecialty because there's so much we can do for the cancer patient. And it's so gratifying to see a disease which once was considered a death sentence, something that's considered merely a chronic illness, something whereby we can treat and control and prolong the lives of patients significantly.
62-year-old Simon Wu was one of Dr. Ang's many patients in 2006. Back then, he was working as an administrative manager at a technical institution in Singapore. Simon had the rest of his life mapped out, having had only 3 years left till retirement, a decent enough nest egg, and a son already getting on in his career. Then, he suddenly came down with unexplained aches and pains.
I actually went to the GPs and they gave me those painkillers and those pills for muscular ache to relieve the pain, but they never go away. After the pain became more severe, I went to General Hospital and they took me for a few tests and they said that there was nothing wrong with me, probably due to bone degeneration.
Simon endured a long bout of diarrhea and paralyzing numbness in his legs. Further tests revealed that there was something much more serious. Simon was diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer in April 2006. His cancer was so advanced that it had already metastasized to the bones. The tumor was pressing down on his nerves. The news dashed his dreams of a peaceful retirement. Simon, in those tenuous times, did some soul-searching. In his 20s and 30s, Simon smoked heavily, even up to 2 packets a day. He stopped smoking in his late 30s, but the damage to his lungs seemed to have already set in.
So we smoked probably like Indians. But after, when we got into our late 30s and 40s, we were more conscious about our health. So my advice out there to everyone, if you can, quit the addiction of smoking. It is for your own good, for your own health, and even for your family and your friends.
Lung cancer is frequently caused by smoking, air pollutants, and radical formation that damage very sensitive lung tissue. Once the DNA of these cells are disturbed, they may grow in an uncontrolled manner. They no longer function like normal and healthy lung tissue. Instead, they tend to block tubules and airway passages. After attacking his lungs, Simon's cancer spread to his bones, affecting mostly his spine. This appeared to be the cause of Simon's premature degenerative condition.
The disease was not well controlled, that he could end up being paraplegic, meaning that he could be paralyzed in both legs. But at the same time, I told him that it was important for us to start treatment as quickly as possible so as to optimize his chances of controlling the cancer.
Despite the seriousness of the prognosis, there was, however, a glimmer of hope, at least in the eyes of Dr. Ang. After going through Simon's previous scans and medical reports, Dr. Ang's assessment was that there was about a 60% chance of Simon's cancer being treatable.
Chance of being able to control. We needed to get the cancer under control in order to minimize his risk of developing paralysis of both his legs. Once the radiotherapy was over, we started him on a course of aggressive chemotherapy. He responded marvelously well to the chemotherapy. His cancer marker, which was initially raised at 350 plus, after his 6 cycles of chemotherapy, it normalized. In other words, it went back to a normal range.
While Simon showed positive results with his treatment, another of Dr. Ang's patients in Jakarta struggled to face up to a pessimistic situation. Ill health broke the stride of this otherwise dynamic individual. 59-year-old Iswandi is a self-made man who had built up his business from scratch. He has been running a travel agency with his sister Sylvie for 16 years. Iswandi proved to be a survivor when it came to business, but he was not quite the fighter when it came to his health. In January of 2003, when Iswandi was told he had cancer, he was inconsolable.
Saya waktu itu antara percaya dan tidak percaya gitu. Saya agak tidak percaya ya, kok bisa cancer ya. Saya masih berusaha untuk cek ke dokter-dokter yang lain. Sampai 2 kali pergi ke tempat lain lagi untuk check up lagi, untuk cek biopsi juga lagi. Tetap masih dibilang itu cancer.
Iswandi had nasopharyngeal cancer. It develops typically as a tumor in the nasopharynx, which is an area in the back of the nose toward the base of the skull. Unlike lung cancer, which is primarily caused by cigarette smoking, there is no definitive cause for nasopharyngeal cancer.
He was already in deep trouble because his cancer was very advanced. But the good thing was that when we did our evaluation, although his disease was so large, it was almost like 20 centimeters in size, but it did not spread to other parts. His lungs, his bones, his liver was still clear. We explained to Iswandi that even though he had very locally advanced disease, it was not metastatic. He still had a chance of a cure.
After going through the scans, Dr. Ang assessed that Iswandi's cancer was still potentially curable. The first weapon he deployed was chemotherapy to attack the cancerous cells.
There have been studies which have incorporated chemotherapy together with radiotherapy in treating NPC, and the studies have indicated that by combining these 2 modalities, the outcome is superior to just radiotherapy alone. Now the big argument is the sequencing. Some people would give chemotherapy and radiation together first and then follow up with more chemotherapy later. I tend to favor giving chemotherapy first and then the chemo radiation together as the final sort of a part of the treatment. So nobody really knows what's the correct answer. But the good news is, because of these advances, because of the combination of chemotherapy, radiation, because of the development of new drugs, we are now seeing a higher and higher cure rate for patients with NPC.
Iswandi needed some convincing before he agreed to the treatment plan. After hearing horror stories of chemotherapy, Iswandi was fearful of the side effects. He had heard that undergoing chemo could be even more traumatic than the cancer itself. he made the near-fatal choice of turning to alternative medicine. And all this time, the tumor in his neck was expanding by the day. Suffering from nasopharyngeal cancer, Iswandi was living with a growing lump on his neck. He also had nosebleeds, blurry vision, and impaired hearing. Gripped with fear, he chose to ignore the seriousness of his condition. Instead, Iswandi forked out a total of $13,000 for herbal medicines and alternative treatments. They did nothing to stop the tumor from growing day by day. It was a near-fatal mistake.
Ya rasa jelas takut, pasti takut. Makan obat aja udah obat. Saya hanya itu aja gitu kan. Dan memang pada saat itu saya takut sekali yang namanya cancer karena banyak teman-teman kita di Indonesia ya, soal ini masalah saya kan pada saat itu banyak orang-orang yang di kemo itu dampaknya luar biasa, yang sakitnya luar biasa. Akhirnya saya putuskan nggak mau ke dokter, toh nanti akhirnya mati juga gitu.
Iswandi chose to live with the excruciating pain for 9 months before he finally overcame his fear and agreed, through Dr. Ang's persuasion, to undergo chemotherapy. The treatment eventually proved to be less daunting because of notable advances in chemotherapy drugs over the last 5 years.
His disease was so big, he couldn't turn his head anymore. He was in severe pain, and therefore whatever we offered him at that point, he was very eager to accept. But the good news was that in actual fact, Iswandi suffered very little from the side effects of treatment. We gave him very good drugs, he had a very good response, and the radiation that we gave him, he had some of the immediate side effects, like the soreness of the mouth, the difficulty in swallowing, the pain on swallowing, but he recovered very quickly and he has returned to full and normal life.
Where applicable, a patient can be prescribed with certain chemotherapy treatments that cause less hair loss, nausea, and skin irritations. It is important to note, though, that different treatments are prescribed for different conditions. Simon was diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer. At the time of diagnosis, his cancer cells had metastasized to his spinal cord, causing debilitating pain all over his body. His treatment plan, however, was well underway. As one of the strongest weapons in an oncologist's arsenal, chemotherapy played a key role in Dr. Ang's treatment strategy for Simon. But before chemotherapy could start, Simon had to undergo radiotherapy treatments to shrink the tumor until it was small enough for chemotherapy to have an optimal effect. 9 months after being diagnosed with nasopharyngeal cancer, Iswandi finally mustered the courage to face up to the seriousness of his condition. He sought treatment in Singapore. Chemotherapy began. After each treatment, Iswandi could see his tumor visibly melting away. Chemotherapy is a regimen of drugs taken either orally or intravenously, both designed to kill cancerous cells. It works its magic by circulating all around the body in the bloodstream, attacking any cancer cells that are dividing.
It doesn't matter where the cancer cell is. If you're using a combination that's used to treat and kill nasopharyngeal cancer cells, these cells can be in the nasopharynx, they could be in the neck, they could be in the lungs, they could be in the liver. It doesn't matter. The drugs will kill the cancer cell. All right. So in other words, chemotherapy is used to treat the entire body, not a particular site. It treats that particular type of cell.
One of the reasons why chemotherapy gained the bad press it unfairly deserves is because of the fact that chemo drugs are often indiscriminate. They kill cancer cells together with healthy cells.
in the bad old days, when you give certain chemotherapy agents, patients will feel very sick after the treatment. They may have nausea, they may vomit for several days, they may have loss of appetite. But now, we have many medicines that can counteract the side effects of chemotherapy, such that patients do not suffer as much as they undergo their treatment.
A patient's perseverance can play a crucial role in the recovery process. Iswandi learned to endure his once-monthly treatments, and to make the ordeal a bit more bearable, Dr. Ang devised a customized prescription that was suited to Iswandi's condition.
We are able to use drugs to minimize their side effects, so that even as they undergo treatment, they need not suffer a significant deterioration in their quality of life. You'll be surprised. We have teachers who come in the morning, have their treatment for their breast cancer, have their chemotherapy, and go back to school to teach for the rest of the day. In the old days, you will never be able to do this, because indeed after treatment, you will end up at home, resting probably for at least a few days, if not a few weeks.
Another relatively recent addition to the oncologist's arsenal is a breakthrough radiation technology known as tomotherapy. Tomotherapy is the usage of an advanced hardware and software to pinpoint radiation concentration such that the rays target only cancer cells, thus minimizing collateral damage. Tomotherapy has revolutionized the treatment of nasopharyngeal cancer. The procedure proved valuable in the treatment of Iswandi's condition.
The nasopharynx sits just below and in front of the brain. On either side are the nerves to the eyes. If your radiotherapy is not well done, the collateral damage could result in you having blindness. It could result in you having destruction of the cranial nerves, whereby you cannot talk. Normally, you cannot swallow. So when the tumor is near vital structures and you want to ensure that there's no or little collateral damage to the neighboring structures, then tomotherapy becomes very useful.
As Simon, after going through a lengthy but successful radiotherapy and chemotherapy program, showed positive signs of recovery, he now leads an active and healthy life, free of the debilitating aches and pains he had endured in the past. His battle against cancer, though, is far from over. Simon still requires maintenance treatment to keep the cancer at bay. The good news is he does not require chemotherapy anymore, as there are no signs of active cancer cells in his body. He does, however, take an oral drug that functions much like chemotherapy. Iressa is one of several so-called smart drugs that have been introduced in recent years. Smart drugs function much like smart bombs, attacking cancer cells and preventing their growth at critical junctures of their development.
Iressa is a form of targeted therapy. It is administered orally. In other words, the patient takes a tablet either once a day or once in 2 days. This drug has the ability to enter the cancer cell and block the pathway whereby it will prevent the cell from multiplying. As a result, it will prevent the cancer cell from growing and facilitate the process of cell death. Hey Simon, how are you?
While Simon will never be cured completely of cancer, with the help of Iressa, he'll be able to maintain an active and even long life while living with cancer. And as far as his emotional state is concerned, Simon is in a much more optimistic frame of mind.
And now, your latest results, which we just did yesterday, is only 1.5. All right.
Thank you, doctor. Thank you.
Well, he hasn't given me any indication, but as I always joked with him, I always ask him, when is he going to give me my birth certificate that is feeling like being reborn again. And right now, every month, I will go back to him for a medical review after doing the blood test and all the scans. This is definitely a small price to pay in terms of having faced death.
I often tell patients that when you have stage 4 cancer, you are like a time bomb that's just ticking away. Tick, 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 tick. When you first present, the clock may be at 9 o'clock, and at 12 o'clock it will explode. And that's the time whereby the disease will be so bad, you will die from it. But when we treat these patients with stage 4 cancer, what we are attempting to do is that we are trying to turn the clock backwards. We are trying to set it, instead of now being at 9 o'clock, we shift it to 6 o'clock or 3 o'clock or 2 o'clock. Not only do you set the clock back, you continue to keep your hand on the clock and prevent it from ticking for as long as possible.
As for Iswandi, after 3 rigorous years of cancer treatment, he finally got the all clear from Dr. Ang. Life is now back to normal for Iswandi, and he credits his speedy recovery to Dr. Ang's patience and expertise.
Dia kasih lihat gambar-gambar, timbul saya punya keyakinan. Ya kan? Wah, ya inilah yang ini kan. Terus dokter Ang bilang, tapi kasus kamu ini 30% berhasil. Ada kalau dokter di Indonesia kan, muka merengut, wah ini susah ini gitu kan. Enggak. Jadi pada saat itu, ya nggak ada masalah gitu. Jadi dia bilang, oke deh katanya.
Dr. Ang does not commit himself by telling you, you're going to get another 3 years or 5 years of good life. And thereafter, we say goodbye. He will remain very optimistic in his treatment to all his patients. And he always say, live well, live to the fullest.
Simon and Iswandi's stories are not isolated ones. For as much as there are tragic ends to some cancer patients' fights, there are also cases of those who have, in their own way, fought against their illness and beat it, while others have successfully kept it at bay. With the introduction of new weapons in the fight against cancer, there is indeed hope among professionals like Dr. Ang and others of even more happy endings in the fight against cancer. This program was brought to you by Parkway Cancer Center.